the field office is still open for Social Security because they're planning on cutting the field offices as well, just for people to be able to access their earned benefits. And why is this happening? Well, because of the lie that Social Security is rife with fraud. That is a lie just like claims of fraud made by President Trump when he said someone was listed in the Social Security system at age 360. So let me say that again. He claimed someone was 360 years old, older not just than the entire Social Security program, but older than the United States of America, because that person would have had to have been born in 1659. But yet Trump and Musk are lying in order to undermine, in order to discredit the entire Social Security infrastructure in our country. Now, a federal judge called DOJ's fraud-finding mission at the Social Security Administration, quote, and they called it a fishing expedition based on little more than suspicion with no evidence at all that had been presented by the Trump administration that there was massive fraud inside the Social Security Administration. And we heard him at the State of the Union address as he's up there talking about people 200 years old, 300 years old. And it turns out that none of it was true. Trump was using the State of the Union address just to lie to the American people about Social Security. Now, why would he do that? Why would he lie to seniors in our country? Why would he lie to people with disabilities? Because, very simply, the Republican Party from 1935 on opposed the Social Security system from being put into place in the first place. They harbor an ancient animosity towards Social Security. They actually didn't support putting Medicare on the books. They harbor an ancient animosity towards all of these programs. And now they feel that their time has come to undermine, to discredit. And instead of giving Americans a level playing field, the administration is hurling curveballs at grandma, curveballs at grandpa, and we're already seeing the effects on Social Security benefits. Recently, a young woman contacted my office because her disability case, which had already been delayed by previous Social Security cuts, is now halted. Halted. Woman with disabilities. This woman was homeless, had a young child to care for while she struggled to afford a place to live without benefits. And my office is contacted on a daily basis by people just like that, by senior citizens who are terrified that they will lose the earned benefits they rely on to eat and to keep a roof over their heads. So instead of helping millions of Americans navigate life's transitions, this administration is implementing a roadmap to ruin for the Social Security Administration. And what's that roadmap? Very simple. First, lie about fraud in the program with no evidence to undermine the public confidence in the Social Security system. Second, use those lies as an excuse to hollow out Social Security and to cut benefits. And third, raise the retirement age and privatize Social Security, handing your benefits over to Wall Street, making the billionaires richer and our seniors poorer. Can you imagine if the Republican playbook had been put in place during the George W. Bush administration, which was to put all of this money out into the market? There would be seniors all across our nation having a Pepto-Bismol moment in the marketplace, wondering what was happening to their life savings. So that was the program that they tried to put in place during the George W. Bush's administration. It still is the plan, but we should not, in fact, fall for that, because we can't trust the markets to guarantee the returns which seniors are going to need in order to have a predictable and safe retirement. Social Security isn't a budget line, it's a lifeline. And for too many of the people who are advocating for privatization, GOP really stands for get old people. That's the plan. If you kick them in the heart, you're going to break your toe. It's a lifeline. In Massachusetts, 1 in 5 people in Massachusetts rely upon Social Security benefits to put food on their table, to buy groceries, and to pay their bills. Here's an astounding number. 22 million Americans are dependent upon Social Security to the extent to which they would be thrown into poverty if they just missed 1 month's check. And that includes about 16 million seniors, 268,000 of whom live in my home state of Massachusetts. If you need a reminder why our seniors should never rely on Wall Street for a secure retirement, take a look at the stock market this week. Trump called Wednesday Liberation Day, but it should really be called Obliteration Day. We've seen the stock market absolutely obliterated over the past 2 days, thanks to Donald Trump. Today, the Dow dropped 2,200 points. It was the worst day for the market since 2020. And now the market has lost more than 10% of its total value over the past 2 days. Grandma and grandpa should not be trusting the casino of Wall Street for their retirement benefits. That's why we set up the Social Security system in 1935. Donald Trump has instituted a reckless trade war, and seniors are seeing their 401ks and retirements evaporate on top of his efforts to slash their health care and Social Security benefits. The only thing the Trump administration and Senate Republicans are offering our seniors is social insecurity. Mr. President, Madam President, Social Security isn't rife with fraud. It's not a Ponzi scheme, as Elon Musk called it. It isn't something that can just be turned off. Social Security is a promise we made to current and future generations who would be absolutely broke if we did not fulfill our promises to them. Republicans and DOJ are taking a sledgehammer to the benefits that are a lifeline, a true lifeline for people with disabilities, and that seniors have worked hard their whole lives in order to earn. Social Security is not an entitlement, it is an earned benefit. And Republicans haven't been able to destroy Social Security yet. There's a reason why it's called the third rail of American politics, and we're not going to allow Musk and Trump or their billionaire buddies to succeed in destroying Social Security with their lies and their cuts and their cruelty. We will not neglect the promise we made, and we will preserve security and dignified retirement for everyone. The loudest voices in this fight are those of countless Americans who simply want the government to honor its promise to retirees, to seniors, and to people with disabilities. This is not an administration that works for the American people. Trump's not going to take from the American people all at once. He's going to do it inch by inch at a time. And Trump and his billionaire enablers will inch by inch steal from the workers to give tax breaks to the rich, steal from seniors to give tax breaks to the rich, steal from children to give tax breaks to the rich, steal from those who are sick to give tax breaks for the rich, to loot all the programs that have been put on the books in order to ensure that our society is so much better than it was in 1935. And I'll tell you this, in 1900, the average age of death, life expectancy, was 48 years of age. We had gone from the Garden of Eden to 1900, life expectancy was 48 years of age. In 1900, 20% of all children died before the age of 5. And then the progressive movement put programs on the books, Social Security, vaccines, Medicare, Medicaid, Head Start, in order to make sure that everyone was able to enjoy the full benefits of our society. That is what this ancient animosity of people like Donald Trump want to rid the society of. So I just want to say Democrats will always be here, always fighting against these callous cuts, and heartless efforts by Trump and Musk and the Senate Republicans. And we're going to do it on vote after vote all night and into the morning in order to make sure that the American people understand who is on their side. So with that, Madam President, I yield back.
Madam President.
Senator from California.
This week, Donald Trump spent his time doing three things: golfing in Mar-a-Lago, announcing his latest set of tariffs that will cost families $3,800 more a year, and that are so chaotic and far-reaching that they included retaliatory tariffs on a remote island inhabited only by penguins. I kid you not. And third, advocating for cuts that would destroy the services and benefits millions rely on for their health care and retirement savings. Today, with the stock market in the tank and the nation's economy in free fall, we're expected to vote on this failed businessman's latest brilliant financial plan for the nation. So let's talk about his budget. At its very core, this bill will give massive tax cuts to billionaires and make middle-class families pay for it. Tax cuts that billionaires simply don't need. And only the billionaires and Republicans in DC apparently support this. But wait, the bill that will pass in the dead of night accomplishes other partisan fantasies as well. It takes away health care and goes after the heart of Social Security. It is the same old playbook. Billionaires win and families lose. Unless we forget, it's the exact same playbook that they ran in 2017. So how exactly is this a win for billionaires? 2/3 of all of the benefits in this bill go to the super wealthy and corporations. 2/3. Over the next 30 years, this bill would spend $25 trillion, that's trillion with a T, on tax cuts for the wealthy and big corporations. It would add $37 trillion to the debt. $37 trillion. That will double the nation's debt. Double it. It will also, by the way, hand tens of millions of dollars to Elon Musk just in the next few years. So he makes out like a bandit. But if you're a family earning, I don't know, $30,000 a year, struggling to get by, or maybe $50,000 or $75,000 a year, you'll be lucky to see any tax relief from this plan. But if you're in the top 0.1%, you'll get an extra $300,000 a year at the very least. For every dollar that would go to people waiting tables or teaching at a preschool, someone in the top 0.1% would get over $52,000. That's $52,000 for every dollar that someone waiting tables or teaching at a preschool will get. To pass this bill will mean that the top 5% of earners will get nearly half of all the tax benefits. That is just not right, not fair, not wise, not sound, not sustainable. Life is already too hard for working families without taking more from them to make the rich even richer. So how is this bill a loser for families? It's a loser because it would raise costs by more than $1,000 on low-income Americans across the board, from healthcare to groceries to housing. Families who are already hurting and are going to be hurting more big time because of Donald Trump's massive tariff tax. Tariffs that are raising the costs of everything they buy, from coffee to the eggs they have for breakfast, to the clothes they dress their kids in before school, to the gas they use to drive to work, to the materials their small businesses import, to the meals that they have when they arrive at home, or the sandwich they grab in between jobs. These families are getting punched right in the gut. And Donald Trump knows it, and knows that this budget would amplify their pain. Because beyond exploding costs for working Americans, it will also decimate Medicaid, threatening health care for nearly 80 million Americans. That's 2 in 3 nursing home residents, 2 in 5 children, and 1 in 3 Americans in rural communities. But even if someone isn't on Medicaid, they'll still feel the cost, they'll still feel the pain. Medicaid is the largest insurer in the nation, so when it goes down, so will the care that so many families rely on. Now, whether you're on Medicaid or you are not, it is your local hospital that may close. Clinics will close, doctors will have to move or shutter their practices. Care that used to be maybe one town away will now be an entire county away, and a very long drive, especially for Americans in rural areas who already cannot afford the cost of living. This bill would be the equivalent of an atomic bomb on the care and the caregivers they rely upon. Caregivers like Sabrina Bishop, a California home care provider. She serves 3 clients around San Diego. 2 are disabled veterans. 1 receives care through California's in-home support services, all of which is funded through California's Medicaid provider, Medi-Cal. Bathing them, medication management, cleaning, laundry, food preparation. She does it all. She lives with her client, Mike. He is at the end stage of dementia and unable to communicate. He can't dial 911. If he sees any medication bottles, he'll just take them. If he sees a car door open, he might just get in, no matter whose car it is. Here's what she told me. My work means that he has someone to help him, that he can safely live and with dignity in his twilight years. Many of the folks who rely on funding from Medicaid don't have a family who can help with around-the-clock care. And without the services that she provides, which are funded by Medicaid, those people won't get their medications on time or be bathed or fed. You're talking about a person's most basic needs. If funding were to get cut more, Sabrina says she thinks many caregivers will just decide they can't afford to do the work they love anymore. There's already a major shortage of care providers. Thousands of people who need care are stuck on waiting lists. And Republicans in this bill want to make things so much worse, so much worse. Seniors and disabled individuals will be trapped in their homes without anyone to look after them or be institutionalized at greater cost, if indeed they can even find a skilled nursing facility that is still open. When asked what she wants members of Congress to understand about her situation, Sabrina said, "Don't be so quick to cut funding for Medicaid. You yourself may end up needing a caregiver. You may be diagnosed with a terminal disease at your next doctor's appointment. You may have a car accident and can no longer take care of yourself." But without Sabrina and the countless others who do the life-saving work that she does, there may be no one to call. That's what we're talking about here. And yet that's what this administration and this Congress seems intent on doing. To deny this care, to give Elon Musk, Donald Trump, and all of their billionaire friends even more money. And that is a disgrace. What about Social Security? On that one, DOJ is starting the dirty work already. We're already seeing the cuts and the clawbacks. Elon and his bros heading into Social Security Administration and firing the staff that make sure you get your check on time. They have plans to close 26 Social Security offices this year alone. They're cutting phone services and pointing seniors to online options that are often unreliable and inaccessible, and if we're being honest, something that not all seniors are able to do. But this is their plan. They're taking a program focused on helping seniors and then turning around and removing all the tools seniors use to get the help that they need. And they're not hiding it. They're celebrating it. Donald Trump's co-president, Elon Musk, went on Joe Rogan to say that Social Security was, quote, the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time. The billionaire Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, said that his mother-in-law wouldn't even notice or care if her check didn't arrive, that only fraudsters would complain if their check didn't arrive on time or at all. And Donald Trump himself, who stood in front of Congress and delivered an address so riddled with false claims about Social Security that it was impossible to disguise his true intention. And that is to sow mistrust, broad mistrust, so they can come for it all, so they can slash it and leave seniors in the lurch, so they can privatize it. That is their plan for much of the federal government. First, they cut the staff, then they cut the services, and finally they say, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Privatize it. Let the billionaires run it. Put it in the market. What could possibly go wrong? Have you seen the market lately? Leaving your hard-earned benefits to the whims of the stock market that Donald Trump has so recently destroyed, plunging millions of seniors into poverty. That is their plan, all for a few more bucks in their pockets. It is up to each of us to stop them, to protect Social Security and Medicaid. But I want to talk for a moment, not to my colleagues here in this fancy building, but to you at home. Whether you're in California or anywhere else in the country, I want to talk to you. Right now, I'm standing on the floor of the United States Senate. In just a few hours, we will be voting on a budget resolution that sets the framework for government funding. Now, that may sound wonky or unimportant, complex, and complicated, but I want to cut through the noise and speak to you about exactly what this will do. In the simplest terms, it will make your life more expensive, make your health care more inaccessible, and sow the seeds to slowly destroy or privatize Social Security. It will do these things because Donald Trump and Elon Musk do not care about you. They don't care about you. They care about Donald Trump and Elon Musk. They care about their billionaire buddies. They care about their bank accounts. They don't care about you or the fact that whether you can afford a home or you can't afford a home, whether you have the money to take vacation days that you have saved up, whether you can afford to take your kid to the hospital, whether you have to drive 2 or 3 hours to the nearest hospital. They don't care. They don't care if you're paying $6 for eggs, $5 for a gallon of gas, or depending where you live, maybe a lot more. They may say they care about those things, but this, their bill that we're about to vote on, says otherwise. This bill in my hand is evidence they you. Now, it's easy to feel hopeless and powerless right now. That's their goal. That's how they want you to feel. They want you to look at the remnants of your retirement savings and the closing of hospitals and the destruction of small businesses and the decimation of schools, and they want you to feel discouraged, to look at the wreckage and say, well, I guess they're right. Maybe none of it does work. Because I want to break it all in pieces. When they tear things down that you rely on instead of building them up, they want to turn to you and say, see, none of this is working. Medicaid isn't working and Social Security isn't working because they broke it, because they're breaking it. And then comes the final step. That's when they sell it all for parts, where they sell off the Social Security you paid into for your whole life, when they destroy the health care that you and your family rely on. So you're forced to pay for private insurance that costs more and helps you less. That is their plan. And you're watching it unfold in real time. That's the thing with Donald Trump. He's broken every promise he's made. Lower prices? No. Stock market growth? Hard opposite. Your 401k, if you're lucky enough to have one, destroyed. A new golden era? Don't make me laugh. Protecting your hard-earned benefits? They're on the chopping block right now. Donald Trump has broken every single promise he's made except one. The promise he made from a gold-plated Mar-a-Lago podium when he told a room full of the richest people in America, and I quote, "You're all people that have a lot of money. You're rich as hell. We're going to give you tax cuts." Well, it turns out those tax cuts are arriving right on schedule, and we will be footing the bill. But you can do something about it. You are not powerless. Make your voices heard. Madam President, I yield back.
Senator from Delaware.
I get a lot of questions from my constituents. Delawareans raise a lot of issues, whether they're stopping me at the Wawa, talking to me on the train, knocking on my door. They ask me about three things, more than anything in the last few months. They're concerned about Elon Musk having huge access to their personally identifying information. They're concerned about the richest man on earth who they didn't elect getting into their data. They're concerned about Trump's tariff tax and how the tariffs he's just imposed are yanking up prices for everything in our country. And they're also deeply concerned about Social Security. I'm going to focus for a few minutes about the alarm I'm hearing from Delawareans that the Trump administration, Elon Musk, and Republicans in Congress are going after our Social Security net, the social safety net, the Social Security benefits that so many rely on for stability and security in their lives, as part of the bill that's moving on this floor tonight to help pay for tax cuts for billionaires that are buddies of Elon Musk. Ask American seniors what they think of Social Security, and they'll tell you it's an earned benefit. It's a vital lifeline. It's the thing that keeps them out of poverty, pays for their medication, helps them afford rent, helps them live decently and safely. 70 million Americans get Social Security benefits every month. 4 out of 10 rely on it for a majority of their income. A few quick examples. Arlene reached out to my office. Arlene's a Delawarean whose husband died in January, and she relies on Social Security to keep paying her bills. Senator, what's going to happen? Ian, a disabled adult who's able to work a few hours a week but requires assistance with simple tasks from his mother due to his intellectual disabilities. Without Social Security and the disability benefits he gets, his whole livelihood is at risk. Kathleen reached out to tell me what she thinks of Social Security. She said, and I quote, "I'm a 64-year-old disabled woman. I'm concerned about my Social Security disability. I'm totally dependent on that check, and I'm terrified of what's happening with Doge." Cheryl Ann wrote my office saying, "I'm 68 and still work to keep from falling behind in my bills. Since COVID, prices have gone up, and with all these new tariffs or taxes, seniors can't make ends meet. I want to retire, but I'm afraid that with Trump messing with Social Security and Medicaid, how can I?" A simple question then. What happens to Arlene, Ian, Kathleen, Cheryl Ann if Republicans are successful in further undermining the stability and the reliability of Social Security? What happens to millions like them for whom this program is what keeps them able to afford their medications, keeps food on the table, keeps a roof over their heads? I've told you what Delawareans think of Social Security, but if you ask Elon Musk, he'll be clear. He's called it a Ponzi scheme. Maybe you don't know Mr. Ponzi. A Ponzi scheme is a fraud. It's something that's fake. It's a Jenga puzzle that comes tumbling down when you pull one of the key pieces. A Ponzi scheme is a fraud. Already, the Doge boys are slashing the workforce at Social Security. They're making it harder for seniors to get the benefits they've earned. They're cutting the budget, firing employees, closing offices, and these needless cuts will just make it harder for seniors to get answers to their questions and to get their checks, forcing those seniors who live in rural areas or who are disabled, like the few I just cited, to struggle to access what they've earned. Doing all of this in the name of cutting waste and fraud is compelling because where there is waste and fraud, we should go after it. But there are tiny amounts of fraud in this program. Don't take my word for it. Listen to Lee Dudek, the Trump administration's chosen acting Social Security commissioner. Lee Dudek, the Trump administration's acting Social Security administrator, at a press conference just last month, estimated that of all the Social Security payments every year, 0.00625%, less than 0.1% are fraudulent. That's actually, I'm sorry, less than 1/100th of 1%. To give you some context, if you think about the entire world, the landmass of the world that is covered by Delaware is 0.003%. And Delaware is pretty small. The world's pretty big. That gives you a sense just how small the fraud is in this program that is treasured by Americans. Doge's favorite talking point about dead people collecting Social Security has been debunked more times than I can count. They claim there's people 200, 300 years old still getting benefits. President Trump said the same thing right here in the Capitol in his address to Congress as he read out the names of folks 200, 250, 300 years old. There's only one problem. It's not true that they're getting benefits. The badly outdated Social Security computer system has a problem with birth dates, and it automatically adds a reference point in certain date errors that's 150 years ago. So yes, there are names on a register of people who were born allegedly a long time ago. But for the last decade, the Social Security Administration automatically stops payments to anyone over 115 years old. Automatically. The checks aren't going out to people whose birth date is recorded as 200 or 250 years old. An independent inspector general looked at this question and said, almost none of the number holders discussed in the report receive payments. So if the fraud doesn't exist, why do they keep talking about it? Well, they have to find ways to pay for tax breaks for billionaires. House Republicans have made plain they want to cut $2 trillion in spending to pay for their massive reconciliation bill that we will soon turn to. And you can't do that without touching Medicaid or Social Security. Let me conclude. Social Security is not a giveaway. It's not riddled with waste, fraud, and abuse. And Democrats are united in protecting Medicaid and Social Security. We need to strengthen Social Security, not cut it. And I stand with my colleagues and every Democrat in this body in saying, hands off of Social Security, President Trump and Elon Musk. Thank you, Madam President. With that, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Hawaii.
Madam President, leave Social Security alone. Leave Social Security alone. Donald Trump wants to gut the most successful anti-poverty program in American history. Over the past 3 months, his administration has made sweeping cuts to Social Security in ways that are already being felt across the country. Wait times have doubled to as many as 4 or 5 hours. Local field offices are closing, websites are crashing, and people are understandably panicked about getting checks or missing payments altogether. But according to Commerce Secretary Lutnick, there is nothing to worry about. Quote, let's say Social Security didn't send out their checks this month. My mother-in-law, who's 94, she wouldn't call and complain. She just wouldn't. She'd think something got messed up and she'd get it next month. She wouldn't complain. Well, when your son-in-law is a billionaire, a missed check is not a very big deal. But when you're a senior on the island of Oahu, where the average rent far exceeds the average benefit, I want you to understand that. The average benefit is about $1,900. The average rent is more than $2,000. 300,000 people in the state of Hawaii depend on Social Security, and the vast majority of them, Social Security is either all of their income or most of their income. The idea that we are going to balance the budget on the backs of seniors who have paid into an earned benefit is immoral. It is wrong. and I speak on behalf of all of my constituents who depend on it. It's not just the 300,000, it's all of the family members. It's all of the family members. I speak on behalf of my mother and father-in-law, George and Ping Kwok. George Kwok worked all his life in a kitchen. Sometimes he was an employee. He eventually ended up owning a place called Kwok's Chop Suey. He sold it and bought a home for his mom and helped to send his daughter to college. Then he started to get blind and he burned his hand in a fryer. And so he was unable to work and he took Social Security disability. He deserves that money. Leave Social Security alone. Social Security cuts were always the third rail in American politics. Even anyone on any side of the aisle with any sense of how to get elected knew not to touch that third rail, but they are grabbing this third rail with both hands. I want to quote a couple of my constituents. One constituent wrote to me, "We are elderly and we are concerned about the potential of cutting Social Security checks. We paid into the system our entire working lives and fear we can't afford food, water bills, and medical care. What will happen with these cuts and the cost of living going up? What will be our safety net? We are afraid of what's to come." Another wrote, "I worked for 36 years for the federal government, including 4 years as active duty Air Force in Vietnam. I contributed to Social Security with the explicit understanding that I would get Social Security as a portion of my retirement. Cutting Social Security means I lose about a third of my retirement with no recourse. I am 77 years old with health issues and haven't planned on getting another job. My wife was a flight attendant for Hawaiian Airlines for 50 years and also depends on Social Security for her retirement. It is completely unfair when she paid into Social Security for more than 50 years just to be abandoned when she is 70 years old." Another constituent. "I'm a 73-year-old woman who, unlike billionaire Commerce Secretary Lutnick's mother-in-law, cannot afford to miss or reduce my Social Security payment. It is my sole income, and I needed to pay rent and buy food. I worked hard all my life and contributed my fair share of taxes towards Social Security. I'm not asking for a free ride. I earned my Social Security. I am not asking for a free ride. I earned my Social Security. Leave Social Security alone." I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Where is she? Oh, Senator from Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise today to call out the threat that this Republican budget and the Trump administration poses to Social Security. President Trump and Elon Musk's move fast and break things mentality is breaking Social Security. And it is obvious that they intend to dismantle Social Security, which will hurt the millions of Americans that rely on it, that count on it, including more than 1 million Minnesotans. Now, one thing that I have learned over the last 70-some plus days is to believe these guys when they tell us what they mean to do. So when Musk recently called Social Security the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time, I'm sure that he meant it. And when he said entitlement spending is, and I quote, "the big one to eliminate," I believe him. And then you have Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who recently said that if his 94-year-old mother-in-law happened to not receive her Social Security check in 1 month, she'd just wait for the next one. Well, I have news for Secretary Lutnick. When people don't get their Social Security checks, they aren't just waiting for the next check, they could be waiting for their next meal. Secretary Lutnick is clearly not in touch with the reality that 22 million Americans, including more than 16 million seniors, would be living in poverty were it not for Social Security. They don't have bank accounts millions sitting in a bank account somewhere. They have a food shelf visit or missed rent or rationing their prescription medication ahead of them. So this is not just an inconvenience or a hassle for them. It is their security, their dignity, their health, and their well-being. And, you know, it's not just Musk and Lutnick that are out of touch. Acting Social Security Commissioner Leland Dudnick threatened to shut down the entire agency in a fit after a federal judge informed him that DOJ is not allowed to root around in people's personal data. And Frank Bisignano, a billionaire that is President Trump's pick to run the Social Security Administration, he has said that he is a DOJ person, and I believe him. And this is evidently just fine with Senate Republicans on the Finance Committee who all voted for him. And I have no doubt that the rest of the Republicans in the Senate will too, because they seem unwilling or unable to stand up to Donald Trump. I think they're just scared. Now, President Trump understands that Americans love Social Security, and so he says, don't worry, my administration won't touch it. Come on now, Americans understand. We can see what's happening. And as my mother used to say, I wasn't born yesterday. We can see that President Trump and Elon Musk are crippling Social Security by making it nearly impossible for people to get their benefits. They are closing field offices at the same time that they're limiting phone service. They're gutting the agency and firing the employees that make Social Security work. In Alexandria, Minnesota, for example, they've fired half the staff. In Rochester, Minnesota, they've fired 40% of the staff. Since Donald Trump took office, the number of calls for help with Social Security into my office has more than doubled compared to what it was in the same time frame last year. So my constituents are spending hours and hours on hold and waiting for office appointments. And every time they get a message from Social Security, it's a different story, and it's confusing, and it is more than irritating. It's downright scary to them. Now, you can call this rank incompetence or the don't know, don't care attitude of this administration, but what it looks like to me is sabotage. If Republicans are trying to save Social Security, this is a pretty funny way to go about it. And now tonight, they're going to try and pass a budget resolution that relies on so-called cost savings from firing Social Security employees to help pay for trillions of dollars of tax breaks for billionaires and big corporations. There's talk about rooting out race and fraud, and I mean, I'm all for that. But understand, this agency already spends less than 1% on administrative overhead, which is far lower than the administrative costs typically paid by private insurers. So when they say cutting costs, what that really means is that when a senior picks up the phone looking for assistance, there's not going to be anyone on the other end of the line. They talk about getting at fraud. Well, listen to this. The Office of the Inspector General conducted a report in 2024 which found that less than 1% of Social Security payments were improper. Less than 1%. You know, if the Social Security Administration was a private sector company, those numbers would put its competitors to shame. What's really happening here is that they are trying to make it harder for people to get what they are owed. And that is, in fact, a cut, and it is wrong. Now, I think that Americans can see what's happening. Donald Trump has surrounded himself with billionaires who don't know and really don't care about regular people who are just trying to afford their lives. They can't even imagine trying to live on $2,000 a month, which is the average benefit for a retiree in Minnesota. I mean, they probably spend more than that on lunch. This is not what we need in this country. We need this government to answer to the people, not the billionaires. We don't need more tax breaks for the wealthiest and most successful people who are doing just fine. Thank you very much. What we need to do is to make Social Security work better for people who have worked hard all their lives, paid in, and deserve a secure retirement. My office, Mr. President, has also received tens of thousands of messages from Minnesotans, and they want us to protect and to strengthen Social Security, not tear it down. And so that's what I'm going to do. Social Security is a universal benefit, and it is a promise that we have made to each other that after a lifetime of hard work, you won't have to worry about a safe, decent, affordable place to call home, a good meal to eat, and the time and the space to enjoy your life. And when this budget resolution gets a vote later tonight, I'll be thinking about Social Security and about the 73 million Americans who count on it, and I will be a hard no. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Senator from Oregon.
I ask unanimous consent that Chance Mitchell, a law clerk on the Budget Committee minority staff, be granted floor privileges during the consideration of House Resolution 14.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Throughout these 25 hours of debate, there's been one theme that no member of this body should forget, that no American should forget, because it's the heart of this bill. And what is the heart of the bill? Families lose and billionaires win. This bill features $2 trillion in cuts to core programs in healthcare, housing, and education, the programs that help families stand on their feet and thrive and move into the middle class and succeed, and their children succeed in the next generation. But no, my Republican colleagues say, slash those programs, because they're not the folks who power our campaigns. We don't care about the families struggling to succeed. Well, no, what we care about are the billionaires. So we wrote this bill for billionaires. Just how much? Well, that $2 trillion funds tax breaks for the richest Americans. And then, because that's not enough, this bill borrows $37 trillion over 30 years to fund additional tax breaks. $37 trillion in debt. Cuts to programs for families to fund tax giveaways to the richest Americans. That's what this is about. If you care about health care across America, if you know that Medicaid provides, well, in my state, about a third of our citizens have health insurance through Medicaid, our rural clinics, our rural hospitals do far better. And why do they do far better with Medicaid? Because patients can pay bills because they have health insurance. Medicaid, critical for programs for people to get out of their addiction. Medicaid, critical for seniors to be able to get nursing home care. Medicaid, essential for those with disabilities. It plays a huge role for our veterans. And they want to strike it down. And they want to strike down Social Security. Get rid of all the clerks that make Social Security work, that turn the gears and make sure the checks go out on time. Because why should we worry about Social Security? Billionaires don't need Social Security. Strike that down. How about lunch programs for schools? We know that kids learn far better when they have a full stomach. So programs like that matter, but not to the billionaires, not in this bill. $2 trillion in cuts for programs families depend on to fund massive tax giveaways to the richest Americans. And then on top of all that, a gimmick to say to the American people, while we're adding $37 trillion in debt, we'll tell you we're adding nothing. It's called current policy baseline. It's magic math. It's like this. You rent an apartment. Apartment costs you $2,000 a month, $24,000 over the year. You rent it for a year under contract. And then you get to the end of the year and you say, I think I'll sign a contract for a second year. And you say, oh, but that will cost nothing. That's the magic math. Well, we know, everyone knows it'll still cost $2,000 a month or more with inflation, more because the rent might go up. But the magic math from the Republican side says, no, it's zero. It's zero. Extending new tax benefits that would have expired costs $37 trillion. And Republicans say, just pretend it away. Now, what I would like to understand is why the party that has often run on fiscal responsibility has decided, first of all, to strike down the nonpartisan numbers that create an honest debate. That's been the rule, the direction, the bipartisan consensus since 1974. We will use honest numbers. We created a whole organization, the Congressional Budget Office, to make sure the numbers were fair so we could have an honest debate here and with the American people. But the magic math produced on this bill throws all that overboard. Fiscal responsibility overboard. Massive $37 trillion in new debt from this bill. You know what? Our entire national debt today is less than 37 trillion. This one bill produces even more debt that's been piled up over 249 years since the Declaration of Independence. If that isn't fiscally irresponsible, I don't know what is. You know, you may ask, don't those folks who are struggling, the 1 out of 10 who are really trying to get on their feet, but is there something for them? Well, the estimate is that they get the equivalent of $6 a year. Well, I mean, if you have a fancy cup of coffee at Starbucks, not where I go for coffee, but many do, costs about $6. This bill doesn't give a cup of coffee a day to the bottom 10%. It doesn't give a cup of coffee a week to the bottom 10%. It gives 1 cup per year. That's what you get out of this bill if you're in the bottom 10% struggling to get on your feet. Don't drink it all at once. Just one little sip each day for 365 days. Because you, in the bottom 10%, are not a billionaire. Going to cut your programs that get you on your feet, the fundamentals for families to thrive in healthcare and housing and education and good paying jobs to enrich the richest Americans. This is perhaps the worst bill I have ever seen debated on the floor of the Senate. So colleagues across the aisle, turn back to your speeches and your election campaigns that said, I'm for fiscal responsibility, and come and join us and write a real bill in which families thrive and billionaires pay their fair share of taxes. That would be an advance for the United States of America. That would be good work on the floor of the Senate. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from South Carolina.
Different view on this. To my good friend from Oregon, who has been a real gentleman to work with, and you got a great staff, and I appreciate our ability to work together, but we have a little different view of what we're doing here tonight. So I'm going to give you our side of the story. I got charts too. I never thought I'd have a chart, but I got one. We're trying to do sort of 4 things tonight. Start a process that we can make the tax cuts permanent, give money to the Department of Homeland Security to continue to secure our border, cut trillions of dollars of waste, which does exist, and support our military. Now, the bill tonight, the resolution, opens up that process that will be done by the House and the Senate authorizing committees. So this doesn't do anything other than start the game. And it's time this game started. Now, what's in this for you if you're not a billionaire, which I am not? If we do nothing, the 2017 President Trump tax cuts expire in December. None of them voted for it. They're going to expire, and what does that mean to you? 6 million jobs will be lost. The average taxpayer would see a 22% tax hike if the tax cuts expire. A family of 4 making $80,610, the median income in the United States, would see a $1,695 tax increase if they expire this December. This is worth about 9 weeks of groceries. 40 million families would see their household child tax credit cut in half. If any of y'all listening out there that not a billionaire, you might want to keep listening. If this expires, you're going to get hit hard. And we don't want that. 26 million small businesses would be hit with a 43.4% top tax rate if Section 199A of the small business deduction expires. Now, why I know about that one? I can't walk 5 feet in South Carolina without somebody begging me to make sure that expensing and deductions and accelerated depreciation doesn't go away because they run a business. Our friends over there run the government. That's all they know. They're very good at making it bigger, not very good at making it efficient. There's no amount of money that's enough for these folks. So if you're looking for that crowd over there to cut your taxes, you're looking in the wrong direction. I got about 100 years to prove that point. The point I'm trying to make is these tax cuts expiring matter to real people raising a family and trying to run a business, particularly small business. This would be devastating. We're not going to let that happen. Now, if you're waiting for this crowd, our friends on the other side, to cut spending, you're going to die waiting. Now, we have a chance as Republicans, if we pass this resolution tonight, to cut spending and make the tax cuts permanent without one Democratic vote. It's called reconciliation. To my Republican friends who may be watching, 4 times in the last 100 years, the Republicans had the House, the Senate, and the White House. This doesn't happen a lot. But with that construct, through reconciliation, what we're starting here tonight, if we get 50+1, we can make the tax cuts permanent and cut spending without one Democratic vote. This is what they use, Democratic friends, to pass Obamacare, all the spending around infrastructure spending, Inflation Reduction Act, which really didn't do much to reduce inflation. They've done this, and we're going to do it a different way. They did it to grow the government. We're going to do it in a way to get more money back to you. And we're going to look at the budget we have up here and see if we can find a way to save some money. Don't you think it's time that we looked at the budget up here like you look at your budget? And we're going to do that. And we're going to secure our border. We don't talk enough about this. In this package, there's $175 billion that will allow the Trump administration to finish the wall. Now, President Trump said during the State of the Union address, the Democrats said we needed new laws. We just really did need a new president. We got a new president, and the flow has really almost stopped. One of the most amazing things that we don't talk enough about. But we want to make sure it doesn't come back on again. So this bill gives the Department of Homeland Security, ICE, Tom Holman, $175 billion to finish the wall, to build, to find more detention bed space, 40,000 to 125,000, so we don't have to let people go. Laken Riley, who was killed by a legal immigrant, he was released because they had no bed space. We don't ever do that again. We're going to build enough detention beds so we don't have to release anybody. I think most people like that. We're going to hire more ICE agents to kick the gang members and the crooks out faster so we can get control of our country and our security. This bill allows $175 billion. That's enough for the entire 4 years if Republicans stick together. So, as a Republican, you said you want to cut waste, you want to cut people's taxes, and you want to secure the border. Your ship has come in. What's near and dear to my heart, like most everybody here, including our Democratic friends, is supporting our military. Well, the budget agreement we reached a few years ago was terrible. The continuing resolution to fund the government through September is below that number. We're spending below inflation on our military. In case you haven't missed it, the world's literally on fire. So this bill gives the Pentagon $150 billion right now to help them upgrade their capability to deal with threats like Iran getting a nuclear weapon. This is good stuff. And the only thing standing between you and this good stuff is a vote tonight continuing a process in the House and the Senate to make it a reality. But if we don't get it right tonight, all this dies. All this opportunity dies if Republicans don't stick together, and you know what? We will. All right, so now all this stuff about me and the budget chairman. What did I do? Well, I made a decision. Last time I checked, if you win an election, you get to make decisions. You know, I'm the budget chairman. It's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot, I can tell you that. So in the 1974 Budget Control Act, when it comes to spending, you never have to offset it. Anything above $50 million in spending, you can use current policy, which is a budget scoring device that just assumes everything goes forever, no offsets. It's my belief that when it comes to tax reductions, I, as the budget chairman, can apply that same concept called current policy to the budget on this floor. And I will do that. I have done that. Now, what does that mean? If we're able to do for taxes what we've done for spending, that means the tax cuts never expire again, and you don't have this cliff putting everybody at risk. That means if we pass what we've put together in the Budget Committee, and Senator Marshall is a member of the committee, we passed a really good proposal to make sure that these tax cuts that we're going to reauthorize stay in place so people throughout the country can count on some certainty when it comes to tax credits for their children, deductions and expensing for their businesses, and having lower rates. I did it. I am proud to do it. And my Democratic friends who are hollering and screaming have done it too, but it always relates to spending. So Judd Gregg, who's a good friend of ours, one of the smartest guys I ever met, was on the Budget Committee. He and Kent Conrad were a great team. And there was a question, can the Farm Bill be added to the baseline? And here's what Judd Gregg said about a Democrat's ability to do that. The chairman of the Budget Committee declared the new baseline under a new budget. The budget chairman has a right to do that. The budget chairman changed the baseline to accommodate the Farm Bill. I'm declaring current policy to make sure the tax cuts stay in place. And when there was an inquiry of a parliamentarian about whose job it is to declare the baseline, this was what Judd Gregg asked: who is the proper scorer of points of order relative to revenues and expenses? And here's what was said. The senator is entitled to an answer under Congressional Budget Act of 1974, termination of points of order, section 312, the Budget Committee determination for purposes of this title and Title IV, the levels measuring budget authority outlays, direct spending, new entitlement authority, revenues for fiscal year shall be determined on the basis of the estimates made by the committee on the budget of the House of Representatives or the Senate as applicable. That's us. That's me. They asked that question in 2008, and that's what they said. Judd Gregg said it's the Budget Committee chairman's authority to determine the baseline, and that's what I did. Okay. And even Bernie agreed, so we don't need to overly dwell on that. This is what the law says. Revenues and spending shall be determined on the basis of estimates made by the committee on the budget of the House of Representatives or the Senate as applicable. That's us. We're elected officials. And wouldn't it be odd if you wrote a law that somebody would run and manage the law nobody voted for? It makes like 0 sense. All right. Now, next one, is that it? Okay. So bottom line, tax cuts are going to be permanent. It will help the economy. And when it comes to estimating what happens around here, CBO, great people, JCT, Joint Commission on Taxation, they make estimates. The one thing they've been consistent about is being wrong when it comes to tax revenue. They've got it wrong like every time. So if history is any guide to what's happened in the past, we're going to get more revenue by cutting taxes. Why do I know that? Because it always happens. What happens all the time too? When we get the new money, we spend it faster than we get it. That's going to stop. If you live in the real world, you get a pay raise. That's a great thing. But if you spend it all and then some, you go right back in debt. So we're going to do two things. We're going to start a process that will allow the tax cuts to be permanent, to give the economy certainty to grow, to create more revenue, to help the government do what it needs to do. And we're going to cut spending to make sure that we lower the amount we're spending because we're spending too much, with the hope of one day doing this, balancing the budget. I said it. I have not been struck dead yet. Our goal to the American people is to create more revenue and lower spending to balance the budget like you do. Now, we don't do this in this resolution, but we start the process because we're 30-something trillion dollars in debt. The only thing between the tax cuts being permanent, having money to secure the border, help the military, and what's the other thing that we're going to do? Cutting spending, is a vote tonight, sometime after midnight, before breakfast, I hope, we'll have a vote in the United States Senate that will trigger a process to do these four things. I am proud of the Budget Committee. We've worked hard. I am proud of Leader Thune, who's pushed this process forward. I appreciate the cooperation to the extent they can do it on the other side. We have a philosophical difference. I totally understand that, but we've chosen a different path. And a major step along that path will occur later tonight. And if we get this right, by Memorial Day, it's my fervent hope and prayer, and I just talked to President Trump, that we can pass one big, beautiful bill that makes the 2017 tax cuts permanent and even more tax on tips for all those people working out there as waiters and waitresses. We have a chance here to look at the federal budget line by line to make sure things in there that make no sense are taken out to save you money. And boy, we're going to have some fun tonight talking about those things. And if you believe securing the border is a good thing and what we're doing is the right thing, by Memorial Day, we'll have fully funded what President Trump needs for all 4 years. That will be amazing. And if you're in the military, money is coming your way to help you do your job, to make sure the rest of us are safe. And we're going to fix the problem with the continuing resolution by giving the military less than inflation at a time when the world's literally on fire. So if we can get it right tonight, by Memorial Day, I'm hoping and praying that the men and women in uniform will have $150 billion they desperately need to do their job and to stay safe. This is the most important thing I have done yet in the Senate, in my view. I've set in motion, along with my colleagues, and if there's ever a team sport, it's politics, the ability to do something we haven't done before, makes taxes and spending the same in terms of policy. Quit playing this game that the American people lose. You will not lose $1 revenue if we make these tax cuts permanent. You'll get more money. But if you keep spending more and more, that doesn't matter. But if you get more revenue and you cut spending, one day we will be on a glide path to balance this budget. It is my fervent desire to do that, and President Trump wants to do it. Let it be said that that starts tonight. I yield.
Mr. President.
Democratic leader.
Mr. President.
Democratic leader.
For the past 2 days, Democrats have turned the Senate into a tribunal. And Donald Trump's, could we please have order? Thank you. Mr. President, for the past 2 days, Democrats have turned the Senate into a tribunal. And Donald Trump's agenda is on trial. I thank the close to 40 of my colleagues who came to the floor and made so many points about that. So now Donald Trump's agenda is on trial. It's time now for Republicans to answer. Tonight, Democrats will bring amendment after amendment to the floor, one right after the other, again and again and again. Our amendments will give Republicans the chance to join us in hitting the kill switch on Donald Trump's tariffs, on DOGE, on the attacks against Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. Now, Republicans are in the majority. The choice is theirs. They see what Americans see. Donald Trump's policies are a disaster. DOGE is a horror. Republicans could snuff it out instantly, tonight, if they wanted. Will Republicans join us tonight and stand up to Donald Trump before he craters the economy? Or will Republicans spend all night trying to defend the mess Donald Trump is making? And he made a lot more of it today. Will Republicans defend Donald Trump's tariff tax, the Trump tariff tax, which would cost families $5,000 a year? Will they defend Elon Musk as he takes a blowtorch to Social Security? Will they defend cutting Medicaid and imperil the health care of 70 million Americans, from newborn kids to seniors to rural communities and veterans? Will Republicans spend all night long, trying to explain to the American people why billionaires deserve a massive tax break, but working people don't deserve basic health care? The choice is theirs. Donald Trump has betrayed the American people. Will Senate Republicans join him in this betrayal? I yield the floor.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, very soon the Senate's going to be voting on a budget resolution that essentially accomplishes 5 objectives, but at least 4. And one is to prevent a $4 trillion tax increase on the American people at the end of the year. Number one. Number two, it rebuilds our military by investing in our military readiness in a way that will enable us to deal with and deter the threats that America deals with in a very dangerous world. It'll restore energy dominance for our country, making energy more affordable to the American people, something that we saw a huge run-up during the Biden inflation days. Part of that was, in a big way, was the cost of energy. Obviously, securing the border. And there are resources in there to make sure that over the course of the next 4 years of this administration, that they have what they need to ensure that our border is secure and that the American people are safe. And finally, Mr. President, reducing spending. Now, I know that's a sort of a novel concept around here. We've heard a lot about, massive tax cuts for billionaires. That's been a recurring theme that we've heard from the Democrats. But the one thing you don't hear a lot about is the run-up in federal spending. So tax revenues, as a general rule, have stayed very static as a percentage of our entire economy, around 17.1% thereabouts. Government spending as a percentage of our economy, on the other hand, has gone up, and gone up dramatically. So just take a look at this chart. Basically, in the last 5 years, the run-up that we've seen in spending has been about 56% from 2019 to 2024. 56% increase in spending. Now, what's ironic about that, Mr. President, is government revenue has also been going up, right? Everybody said, well, you're going to cut taxes, we're going to run these big deficits. Well, what happened? In 2017, we cut taxes on the American people. We unleashed the American economy. We reduced rates, accelerated cost recovery, so people could recover their capital investments more quickly. What did they do? They invested. And it created more, not less revenue. $1.5 trillion more than was projected at the time by the Joint Committee on Taxation and the CBO. $1.5 trillion more revenue than what was projected. I think you can say they missed it by a long shot. Well, this time around, we've seen estimates, and Senator Graham, Senator Crapo were down here earlier today, suggesting that the Council of Economic Advisors prediction is that you will see revenue increase by about $4 trillion by making the 2017 tax law permanent. So what we have, Mr. President, the reason we're running these big deficits isn't because we tax too little, it's because we spend too much. That's the delta. Tax revenues have gone up, and gone up consistently over time, particularly since 2017. What's gone up a lot faster, as I said, is government spending. And so we have this deficit, and the way we're going to have to deal with that is to get more growth in the economy, generate more revenue, because when the economy is growing and expanding, it's creating jobs, people are working, they're taking realizations, and they're paying more taxes. And that's what happens when you reduce taxes. And that's why it's so important that we extend and make permanent the 2017 tax law. This is what we're talking about here today. This is what this conversation, frankly, is all about. Now, Mr. President, one of the things that has been interesting in this debate, because I heard lots of conversation from my colleagues on the other side about massive new tax cuts for billionaires. But let me tell you what, if you vote against this budget resolution, you will be voting for. You will be voting for a $4 trillion tax increase on our economy and on the American people. Of that $4 trillion tax increase, $2.6 trillion will fall on people who make less than $400,000 a year. Something that Joe Biden, and I think pretty much every Senate Democrat, pledged not to do. Well, how does that happen, you ask? Well, here's what happens. In 2017, when we passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, one of the things, the features of that bill, was a doubling of the child tax credit from $1,000 to $2,000. It also had a near doubling of the standard deduction, and it had a lowering of rates. It had multiple ways in which working families in this country would benefit. If we don't extend the tax relief before the end of the year, $2.6 trillion of that tax increase falls on people making less than $400,000 a year. Now, I've heard some the Democrats' own presidential candidate said last year, and I quote, "We cannot, and I will not, raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000 a year." That was Vice President Harris, who was running for president. President Biden made the same promise, as did the current Democrat leader. And when the Democrats were considering their so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which perhaps more aptly could have been titled Do Nothing About Inflation Act, the Democrat leader repeatedly emphasized the Democrats would not be raising taxes on anyone making less than $400,000 a year. Well, that's it. That's what you're doing. Because this tax increase is going to hit American families. 2.6 trillion of it is going to hit families making less than $400,000 a year. So you cut the child tax credit. Let's say you have 4 kids in this country. Now, the tax credit, child tax credit, is a direct credit against tax liability, meaning it's a dollar-for-dollar reduction in tax liability if you have a tax liability that exceeds the amount of the credit. So let's say you have 4 kids. Today it's $2,000. Well, if we don't move to extend this tax relief by the end of the year, that $1,000 is going to be from $8,000 down to $4,000, $2,000 per child down to $1,000 per child, and that family's taxes are going to go up by about $4,000. Now, if they don't have that big of a tax liability, there's a refundability component, and we can have a conversation about the merits of that, but that means they're going to be getting a payment or not, and probably not, because cutting that child tax credit back to $1,000 is going to fall largely on people who have families in this country. Same thing with the standard deduction. It will be cut nearly in half. And the interesting thing about that, Mr. President, is when we made that change back in 2017, fewer people started itemizing, more people started taking the standard deduction because the standard deduction was about $30,000 a year. Well, what happens if we don't extend this tax relief? That $30,000 goes back down to about $15,000 a year. Again, hitting working families, coupled again with what I said is higher rates. The rates will go back up. So forget about the idea that you're not going to raise taxes on people making less than $400,000 a year, because you clearly are. That's just a fact. It's just simply a fact. So what about small businesses? Well, small businesses would pay, if we don't extend the current tax policy, $600 billion more if these tax cuts expire. Because pass-through businesses, and that's your LLCs, your subchapter S corporations, your sole proprietorships, pay at the individual rate. The rates would go back up, and we put a feature in that bill called 199A. It was a 20% deduction for pass-through businesses. That also goes away. So small businesses are going to pay $600,000 more per year, or I should say, or $600 billion more throughout the course of this tax policy if we don't do something to extend it. So you lose 199A, you lose the lower rates that come with it if you're a small business, and you'll see a lot less investment in our economy. Now, as I mentioned in 2017, 2 of the objectives on that, particularly on the business side, were to lower rates and to allow for faster cost recovery and to grow the economy. And it did. It worked. The economy over the past 7 years grew, if you can believe this, 5.4% more than what CBO had projected in 2017 prior to the passage of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Well, what did that mean? It meant a 50-year low for unemployment, record low poverty, high median household income, a narrowing of the income disparity gap in this country. So, Mr. President, what about deficits? As I said before, by any objective metric, revenues dramatically exceeded what was predicted in 2017 about what the effect of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act would be. Now, revenues, as I mentioned, you look at this chart again, on average about 17% as a percentage of our economy. Unfortunately, spending as a percentage of our economy, which as recently as a decade ago was about 20%, is now over 23% and growing to 24 to 25%. And part of that is all the new spending that was associated with things like, for example, the IRA. So the inflation, so-called Inflation Reduction Act, there were some provisions in there, some energy provisions, for example, that at the time were scored to cost about a little over $200 billion. Today, they're actually over $1 trillion. So CBO missed that one by about 400%. And as I said earlier, the Council of Economic Advisors projects a $4.1 trillion increase in revenue from extending the 2017 law. So could it be that the run-up in deficits happened because of the last two Democrat reconciliation bills? Or perhaps some other things that they have done along the way, like the $250 billion in SNAP increase, almost, as I said, without any approval from Congress, something that my colleagues on the other side have talked about, how this executive branch has, ignored the will of Congress. Well, that was a $250 billion increase without approval from Congress. Then you had the student loan forgiveness program. And as you recall, student loans, that program was used as a pay-for back in a reconciliation bill the Democrats did back in 2010. And when they did that, many of us predicted that they would go ahead and use it to forgive student loans. So student loan now forgiveness, which is subject to court action, resulted in several $100 billion of additional spending not approved by the Congress, but that particular move got no pushback from anybody on this side of the aisle, not a peep. Hundreds of billions of dollars of spending by use of executive power. And what I've concluded from all this is that my colleagues on the other side talk a lot about misuse or abuse, if you will, of executive power, but that's not the issue. It's how the executive power is used. And if it's used in a way that you agree with, which it was in both of those examples I just mentioned, then you're fine with use of executive power. Like I said, didn't hear a peep from people over here when that was done. Now, my colleagues, both Senator Graham and Senator Crapo, talked about the use of a current policy baseline. So in 2012, the Obama White House came up with something called the alternative fiscal scenario when it came time to extend the Bush tax cuts. And that was about a $4 trillion use of the alternative fiscal scenario. Translation, current policy baseline. There are 18 Democrats still here in the Senate today who voted for that, for use of that baseline. And Mr. President, I would simply say that when it comes to extending tax relief, there's always a reluctance by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. When it comes to new spending, they embrace that idea. We have a different view. We have different views of government. And the use of reconciliation, which is what this is about, the budget resolution opens the door to reconciliation, is in many respects a great example of the contrast in how we view this. The Democrats view reconciliation as a way to grow government, increase spending, new programs. The ARPA bill was about $2 trillion in spending. The IRA was about $1 trillion in spending. Both were used by the Democrats through a budget resolution and reconciliation to increase spending. Republicans, a lot of times, and we did in 2017, used it to reduce taxes and to reform the tax code, which was desperately needed. But as a consequence of that, as I said, we got not less revenue, but more, $1.5 trillion more than was predicted at the time. And on the other side of the equation, when it comes to spending, the estimators, the so-called referees, tend to underestimate how much things are going to cost. Example, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. But the bottom line in all this, Madam President, is that we need to address a lot of concerns in this country, many of which are dealt with in this budget reconciliation or this budget resolution and ultimately the budget reconciliation bill. But one of the most important ones is this number right here. The deficits that continue to grow over time as a result not of too little revenue, which continues to increase over time, but of dramatically increased spending. That's the issue. And my colleagues here on this side of the aisle believe that you get at that by bending the curve down on the spending side, and on the tax, regulatory, energy side, pro-growth policies particularly making permanent the tax policy that was passed in 2017, that will unleash investment in America and which will lead ultimately not only to better paying jobs, lower unemployment, hopefully a narrowing of the income disparity that we have in this country, but also, interestingly enough, higher government revenues. That's what this is all about. Whether you want to vote for extending the tax policy and avoiding a $4 trillion tax increase, or whether you want to vote in favor of this resolution and make sure that the 2017 tax policy that was passed is extended permanently and that it unleashes the American economy in a way that will continue not only to create those better paying jobs, but also make this deficit picture look a lot smaller by comparison, coupled with significant reductions in spending. That's what we got to do. That's what this is about. And I hope that our colleagues, all of our colleagues on this side of the aisle, will vote yes tonight. We're going to have a number of amendment votes, which always happens during a budget resolution, vote-a-rama, and we look forward to getting that process underway. So let's let the voting begin. Thank you, Madam President. And Madam President, I would now ask unanimous consent that the following amendments be in order. That the amendments be reported by number with no amendments in order prior to a vote in relation to the amendments. Number 1, Sullivan, number 2035. Number 2, Merkley, number 1758. Number 3, Reed, number 1645. Number 4, Lujan, number 1726. Number 5, Warner, number 1310. Number 6, also Brooks, number 1466. Number 7, Kelly by voice, number 1737. Number 8, Murphy by voice, number 1977.
Hold 1 second. Eliminate the first part. Just reword it and don't say the first part.
Number 7, number 1737 Kelly. Number 8, number 1977 Murphy. Number 9, number 1773 King. Number 10, number 1647 Warren. Number 11, number 1884 Schumer. Number 12, number 1774 Padilla. Number 13, number 1646 Bennett. And number 14, number 1760 Paul.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Madam President. I yield time on the budget resolution.
Without objection.
Madam President.
Senator from Alaska.
Madam President, I call up my amendment number 2035 and ask that it be reported by number.
Clerk will report.
The Senator from Alaska, Mr. Sullivan, proposes an amendment number 2035 to amendment number 1717.
Madam President, my amendment says we're going to strengthen Medicaid and Medicare so that they're available for years to come, because these are important programs. They are certainly important programs to the Alaskans I represent. Now, Madam President, this is the exact same amendment I offered in February. Nearly every Republican voted for it, but not one Democrat. My colleague and friend from Oregon, who's on the floor here, said my amendment back then was a ruse to kick people off the program. But to my colleague and friend from Oregon, if that's true, here's my question. Why did he vote for the exact same amendment in 2017? That's right, Madam President. 24 Democrats who voted against my amendment 2 months ago voted for the same amendment in 2017. I ask unanimous consent that their names be submitted for the record.
Without objection.
Talk about a ruse. This is the worst kind of partisanship, using people's health care to fearmonger. We should all want to weed out waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicaid and Medicare, and we must keep these programs going. We should do both. I ask my colleagues to vote for this amendment, and all my colleagues who voted for this amendment in 2017 should simply vote for it again.
Senator from Oregon.
Thank you, Madam President. Once again, Senator Sullivan is out here saying that he is for protecting vulnerable people, but by not defining the vulnerable, the Sullivan Amendment is code for states to cut benefits or kick people off their coverage altogether. And to me, the Sullivan Amendment basically says is if somebody thinks you're not poor enough, you're not sick enough, or you're not disabled enough, we're not going to be there for you. And here's the difference between now and 2017. We learned during the pandemic how important expanded Medicaid is to vulnerable people. And this language that my colleague from Alaska is offering doesn't protect vulnerable people. So I urge my colleagues strongly to oppose it.
The question is on the amendment. Is there sufficient second? There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Ossobrooks, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Banks, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Blunt Rochester, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Britt, Mr. Budd, Ms. Cantwell, Mrs. Capito, Mr. Cassidy, Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons, Mr. Cornyn, Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Curtis, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Gallego, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, I did, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper, Ms. Hirono, Mr. Hoven, Mr. Husted, Mrs. Hyde-Smith, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice, Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley, Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Marino, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young, Senators voting in the affirmative: Cassidy, Collins, Cornyn, Cotton, Kramer, Daines, Ernst, Fisher, Graham, Grassley, Hawley, Marino, Murkowski, Sheehy, Sullivan, and Thune. I said his name. Mr. Marshall, aye. Senators voting in the negative: Blunt Rochester, Duckworth, Durbin, Fetterman, Hassan, Heinrich, Kane, Kim, King, Klobuchar, Merkley, Ossoff, Padilla, Reed, Schatz, Schumer, and Wyden. Mr. Tillis, aye. Mrs. Moody, aye. Mr. Markey, no. Mr. Kelly, no. Mr. Peters, no. Mr. Hickenlooper, no. Mrs. Blackburn, aye. Mr. Rounds, aye. Mr. Schiff, no. Ms. Smith, no. Mr. Welch, no. Mr. Lujan, no. Ms. Baldwin, no. Oh. Ms. Lummis, aye. Mr. Warner, no. Mr. McCormick, aye. Mrs. Shaheen, no. Mr. Blumenthal, no. Ms. Warren, no. Mr. Booker, no. Mr. Bennett, no. Mr. Justice, aye. Ms. Rosen, no. Mrs. Capito, aye. Mr. Brasso, aye. Mr. Warnock, no. Mr. Wicker, aye. Mr. Risch, aye. McConnell. Mr. McConnell, aye. Mr. Johnson, aye. Mr. Whitehouse, no. Mr. Cruz, aye. Ms. Hirono, no. Mr. Murphy? No. Mrs. Hyde Smith, aye. Mr. Moran? Aye. Mr. Bozeman, aye. Mr. Haggerty, aye. Mr. Kramer? Aye. Mr. Paul, aye. Ms. Also Brooks, no. Mr. Curtis, aye. Ms. Cortez Masto, no. Mr. Tuberville, aye. Mr. Lee, no. Mr. Young, aye. Mr. Curtis? No. Ms. Slotkin? No. Mr. Sanders? No. Mr. Langford, aye. Mr. Hoven, aye. Mr. Gallego, no. Mr. Coons, no. Mr. Budd, aye. Mr. Banks, aye. Mr. Scott of Florida, aye. Mrs. Britt, aye. Mr. Schmidt, aye. Mr. Husted, aye. Mr. Ricketts, aye. Mr. Mullen, aye. There we go. Thank you. Mrs. Gillibrand, no. Kennedy, Mr. Kennedy, aye. Mr. Van Hollen, no. Mr. Scott of South Carolina, aye.
On this vote, the yeas are 51, the nays are 48. The amendment is agreed to.
Madam President,
The majority leader.
Madam President, I would ask that moving
The
forward,
committee will come to order
the duration of this bunch of votes be 10 minutes in duration.
without objection.
We can start voting quickly.
Senator from Oregon.
Call up my amendment 1758 and ask that it be reported by number.
The clerk will report.
The senator from Oregon, Mr. Merkley, proposes an amendment numbered 1758 to amendment numbered 1717.
Colleagues, my good friend from South Carolina compared this bill to balancing the family budget. Well, back in my neighborhood, balancing the budget means you only spend what you earn. It doesn't mean borrowing, and it doesn't mean borrowing $37 trillion and sticking it to the next generation. If you agree that we should work towards balancing our budget, then vote for my amendment. It creates a point of order against any reconciliation bill that by itself would create more debt on America, on the next generation, than all the debt our nation has run up between July 4th, 1776 and today. I reserve the balance of my time.
Madam President,
Senator from South Carolina.
to my good friend from Oregon, you never put a point of order in your own resolution, and we're not going to do it either. If you're really serious about trying to control spending, you need to start controlling spending.
Order in the chamber, please.
Okay?
Senator, proceed.
So there are two things we're trying to do here. Set in motion controlling spending by looking at the budget with the eye to reducing spending. We're trying to make the tax cuts permanent because every time we cut taxes, revenue goes up, we just spend too much. So we got a novel idea. We're going to increase revenue by cutting your taxes. We're going to control spending. And that's why they don't like this, because they don't like doing either one of those.
Madam President,
Senator from
what
Oregon.
we don't like is $37 trillion in new debt foisted onto the next generation. This is throwing fiscal responsibility overboard to the bottom of the sea. We've never had a more fiscally irresponsible bill on the floor of the Senate than this one.
Question is on the amendment. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Also Brooks. Ms. Baldwin. Mr. Banks. Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Blunt Rochester, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Britt, Mr. Budd, Mr. Budd, Ms. Cantwell, Mrs. Capito, Mr. Cassidy, Ms. Collins,
Mr. Coons, Mr. Cornyn, Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Curtis, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Gallego, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper, Mr. Rono, Mr. Hoven, Mr. Husted, Mrs. Hyde-Smith, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice, Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley, Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Moreno, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen,
Are you offering any amendments? Can I mark you off my list? I don't know. I hope not.
Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren,
I know your dad.
Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young. Senators voting in the affirmative: Also Brooks, Baldwin, Bennett, Blumenthal, Blunt Rochester, Booker, Coons, Cortez Masto, Durbin, Fetterman, Gallego, Gillibrand, Hassan, Heinrich, Hickenlooper, Hirono, Kelly, Kim, King, Klobuchar, Lujan, Markey, Merkley, Murphy, Ossoff, Padilla, Peters, Reed, Rosen, Sanders, Schatz, Schiff, Schumer, Shaheen, Slotkin, Smith, Warner, Warnock, Warren, Welch, Whitehouse, Wyden. Mr. Van Hollen, aye. Mr. Kane, aye. Ms. Cantwell, aye. Senators voting in the negative: Banks, Barrasso, Blackburn, Bozeman, Britt, Budd, Capito, Cassidy, Collins, Cotton, Kramer, Crapo, Cruz, Curtis, Ernst, Fisher, Graham, Grassley, Hawley, Hoven, Husted, Hyde-Smith, Johnson, Justice, Kennedy, Lee, Lummis, Marshall, McCormick, Moody, Moreno, Murkowski, Paul, Ricketts, Rounds, Schmidt, Scott of Florida, Scott of South Carolina, Sheehy, Sullivan, Thune, Tuberville, Wicker, Young. Ms. Duckworth, aye. Mr. Langford, no. Mr. Daines, no. Mr. Cornyn, no. Mr. McConnell, no. Mr. Tillis, no. Mr. Haggerty, no. Mr. Risch, no. Mr. Mullen, no.
The yeas are 46, the nays are 53. The amendment is not agreed to. I recognize the senator from Rhode Island.
My amendment number 1645 and ask that it be reported by number.
The clerk will report.
The senator from Rhode Island, Mr. Reed, proposes an amendment numbered 1645 to amendment numbered 1717.
Mr. President, this amendment is co-sponsored by Senator King and 18 of my colleagues. Our amendment would simply prevent any cuts in health care coverage for Medicaid beneficiaries, something we should be able to agree on, I hope. We all have talked about the need to protect Medicaid. Now we have to stand up and do that. This vote is an opportunity to put our money and our votes where our words are. And the question is, will you protect the nearly 80 million Americans who rely on Medicaid? Or you vote for tax giveaways for the wealthiest at the expense of everyone else? I would urge my colleagues to support this amendment.
I recognize the senator from Idaho.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're
Can
going to
we,
see.
Senator Suspend, can I ask for order on the floor, please? Senator from Idaho is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're going to see a lot of this tonight, but this is what I call the politics of fear. The argument is going to be made that we're going to hurt all kinds of different people tonight in all kinds of different ways, but the reality is that's not going to happen. The president has been clear. Any reforms to Medicare or Medicaid must not reduce patient benefits. In fact, Section 3003 of this budget resolution reaffirms that commitment. The budget resolution gives the Senate maximum flexibility to meet this goal, and there's no need for this amendment.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Also Brooks. Ms. Baldwin. Mr. Banks. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Bennett. No. Mrs. Blackburn. Mr. Blumenthal. Ms. Blunt Rochester. Mr. Booker. Mr. Boozman. Mrs. Britt, Mr. Budd, Ms. Cantwell. Mrs. Capito. Mr. Cassidy. Ms. Collins. Mr. Coons. Mr. Cornyn. Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Curtis.
I'm going to join my friend from Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Mr. Daines. Ms. Duckworth. Mr. Durbin. Ms. Ernst. No. Mr. Fetterman. Mrs. Fisher. Mr. Gallego. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mr. Haggerty. Ms. Hassan. Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper. Ms. Hirono. Mr. Hoven, Mr. Husted. Mrs. Hyde-Smith. Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice. Mr. Kane. Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy. Okay, hold on a sec. Mr. Kim, Mr. King. Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Langford. Mr. Lee. Mr. Lujan. Ms. Lummis. Mr. Markey. Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley. Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Marino. Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski. Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young, Senators voting in the affirmative: Alsobrooks, Baldwin, Blumenthal, Blunt Rochester, Booker, Cantwell, Collins, Coons, Cortez Masto, Duckworth, Durbin, Fetterman, Gillibrand, Hassan, Hawley, Heinrich, Hickenlooper, Hirono, Kelly, Kim, King, Klobuchar, Lujan, Murphy, Ossoff, Padilla, Peters, Reed, Rosen, Sanders, Schiff, Schumer, Shaheen, Slotkin, Smith, Van Hollen, Warner, Welch, Whitehouse, and Wyden. Mr. Bennett, aye. Mr. Moran. Senators voting in the negative. I have you. Thank you. Mr. Schatz, aye. Senators voting in the negative: Banks, Barrasso, Blackburn, Bozeman, Britt, Budd, Capito, Cassidy, Cornyn, Cotton, Kramer, Crapo, Curtis, Fisher, Grassley, Haggerty, Hoven, Husted, Hyde-Smith, Johnson, Justice, Kennedy, Langford, Lee, Lummis, Marshall, McConnell, McCormick, Moody, Moran, Marino, Mullen, Paul, Risch, Rounds, Schmidt, Scott of Florida, Scott of South Carolina, Sheehy, Sullivan, Thune, Tuberville, and Wicker. Ms. Warren, aye. Mr. Ricketts, no. Mr. Kane, aye. Mr. Warnock, aye.